Senator Joanne Brown, did you want to play this clip first from session, or?
I guess we can. So
Okay.
we're going to be talking about what happened in session. They're going to go back in, I think, at 10, right? So it looked like the Republicans were trying to have an open discussion on Bill 130, public law. I don't know what the public law number is, but this is what relates to the error with the war claims.
Yeah, Arrogate. So here we go, the thought from session.
Colleagues, as you know, there's been an issue with Bill 130 that was passed by this body in the last session. We're going to have a recess until 11 a.m. to consult with legal. We're now in recess until 11 a.m. I am noticing the lack of a quorum. I'm going to recess until 2 p.m. Recess until 2 p.m. Minute 26 na legislature in Guahan is back in session. We are on the second reading file. And the first bill on our second reading is bill number 73-36 COR. Senator Atta, you're recognized. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I'd like to move back to motions for the purpose of going to the Committee of the Whole for the purposes of discussing the actions of the body for Bill 130.
On the motion, notwithstanding the rules, to go back to motions.
No, motions, notwithstanding the House rules.
Right.
Go back to motions for the purposes of going to the Committee of the Whole for the purposes of discussing the actions of the body for Bill 130.
Right. Well, I'm going to bifurcate that. First, we're going to deal with the motion, the notwithstanding motion to go back to motions.
Yes.
And then you'd have to make another motion. Okay. So on that motion to go back to motions, notwithstanding the rules, is there any objection? Objection? All in favor of going back of the motion to go back to motions, please raise your hand. Motion fails.
Madam Speaker, can I ask for a little bit of a recess?
Pardon?
A recess?
A motion for a recess?
No, non-debate. Recess, please.
Pardon?
A recess, please.
Yeah, I'm asking. There's a motion for a recess. Is there any objection? There's an objection?
I'd like to ask what's the purpose of the recess?
Yeah, Madam Speaker, so I can discuss it with you.
Pardon?
So I can discuss it with you.
On the motion, is there any objection? No objection. We're in recess for 2 minutes. In the absence of a quorum, after roll call has been made, the Speaker or the Chairperson of the Committee of the Whole, at that person's discretion, may make a call of the House and call a recess until the absent members are present. I'd like to ask or recess until those absent members become present, but not mandate that all of you be required to stay here while they are being brought back in. So we're just, I don't know, is there any motion? I'd ask the Sergeant of Arms if he could please notify the senators. Senator Rijal.
Madam Speaker, actually, I'd like to make a motion that we just recess until Monday. It's already 4 p.m. We're here to do work. Some of our colleagues apparently have walked out, and I think it's unfair to walk out and leave the rest of us here just because you lost on a vote. Are we going to walk out every time we don't get our way when we're voting? This is a democracy. You vote. If you have the votes necessary, then your motion carries. If you don't have the votes necessary, don't walk out, don't take your ball and go home. So I recommend that we recess until Monday, make every best effort in all good faith to bring the rest of our colleagues back to session on Monday so we can continue our work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. We'll be in recess until Monday at 10 a.m.
We're going to play a soundbite we got from Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio relative to this whole error thing.
Well, I think in the big picture, I think the upside is everybody wants to try and get a program done. And I'd say that based on what we believe the finances are available and what the intent of the legislation, the governor would be able to submit an implementation plan to the legislature that's going to give us a pathway to resolve some of these errors. Now, the big error, to me, is the fact that many war survivors who filled out applications at the time the program was open gave them to trusted offices and they were never filed. There were other people that I've met that thought that they had filed and that in previous years their files would be automatically given to the commission. It's created a lot of problems. So my hope and my priority, I would tell you this, is that we need to resolve the claims for those Manumco that were qualified in the federal legislation, and for many reasons we're not able to file an application that the federal government was able to look at. And I think that if we focus in on that group, we'll be able to make good on the promise to give them justice.
Wow. So, Senator Brown, first let's start with what happened.
Gosh, where do you begin? I mean, you know, our position pretty much is we wanted to have a public accounting on this issue, which is really, you know, unfortunate that this happened and how this issue is being played out. I think we were taken aback by the level of resistance on wanting to have that. You know, we have no problem showing up and doing our job. It's always ironic that we're getting lectured by those that don't consistently show up all day, you know, show up to public hearings. I'm only a member of one committee in the legislature, but the odds are fairly good. If you go back and look at the record, it's us very senators that are raising this issue, that are around, engaged, involved at session. You know, we're there to do work. We have no problem with doing that, but I think a lot of attempts, rather than addressing the key issue, which is to have a public open accounting of what happened, because obviously this is serious. This is not a casual thing. And had the tables been turned around and it was a Republican majority, I doubt the Democrats would simply say, oh yeah, it was a clerical error. Let me go respond to the press release and let's go home. It's all good. I doubt it. You know, the accusations that this is intended to be political. When something like this happens, and this is not a common error, at least we hope it isn't, but that's why we want a public accounting of this process. And I think there's a lot of attempts to direct the issue elsewhere, to not respond to it publicly, you know, do it behind closed doors, which we argue should not be the case, which this process should be transparent. Because when you serve as a member of the legislature, you've been duly elected by the public, you take one action on the official floor of the legislature, and then the outcome is 180 degrees different from that. That is something that we all should be concerned about. And so the resistance in from the leadership of the legislature to not want to do this is just, it's very concerning. This is not what we expected. And so to continue on and make it seem like, oh, let's just get back to business here and let's go back to session and let's just deal with all these other bills. You know, we don't set the schedule. We don't set the schedule when session gets called. We don't get the session we schedule when, you know, we're told when we come in to vote. We're not directing the staff. And you know, to try to distract this issue from really what the main point is, it's unfortunate. This is not the response that we expected. I would think that everyone in the legislature would want to have a public accounting of this issue so that we can identify what is the key problem and what do we do to correct it so that it doesn't happen again, so that we and obviously the members of our community can have some trust in the process.
Do you believe this clerical error was intentional and corrupt?
Well, I hope it wasn't intended. I mean, all at the end of the day, I don't think any one of us would want to believe that it was intended. But I think that needs to be put on the official record. How did we get here? How did we get here? You know, we have key staff that are hired, attaches of the legislature that are voted on by the body to perform these responsibilities. And, you know, I've been around the block quite a few times. You know, I've been at this. This is my 7th term. 3 of those terms I've served as legislative secretary. So I understand the importance and the process of legislation. Once it's passed by the legislature, how it's transmitted to the governor, how it's reviewed, and then once it's received back from the administration, how it gets delivered back and accounted at the Guam legislature. So when something like this happens, it's very concerning. And it should be to all of us, because if an action can be contrary, I mean, if anyone can insert something intentional or unintentional, we should be very concerned about how did that happen and what steps do we need to correct that. The level of resistance that we have received to not want to have a public accounting, and the response is, well, let me just go to the media and talk about it. Let me just issue press releases, and that's the response. I don't think that's the official action that we should be taking, and that's the position that we've had on this issue. So, to try to play it up that, oh, we just don't want to come in and play ball, we're there at the game when most of the people are never around, including session. Look at the record, look at who's there. Just, the cameras are on when we're in session. So I think it's unfortunate that others want to distract from the real issue at hand, because the key people in leadership, if they don't want to put their staff up that work for them, then by all means, why don't they? They're in the position of leadership that make these decisions. Why don't they respond to it publicly? What is the problem with that? Why are we hiding from the people? And why are we hiding from each other on this? Us going in a back room having this conversation does not resolve the issue.
Have you heard whether or not Vice Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes or the co-author, Senator James Moylan, plan on, I guess, introducing anything to undo this error?
I don't know. I don't know what their actions are. I mean, I want to ask what they did to review this bill before it got out, because this is their bill. Normally, if you're the sponsor of the bill, you also have a responsibility in this process. Rules has a responsibility in this process. Legal has a responsibility in this process. The recording secretary has a responsibility in this process. But I think it's important before we rush and say, oh, let's keep going on with legislation, because it's turning out every few weeks, literally. We were just in session 2 weeks ago. Now we're back in session again. The evening that this was voted on, we were there till later in the evening. We were told to show up at 7. We didn't vote till almost 9 o'clock. We had to be there the following morning at 7:30. We don't get to decide when we vote. We could have very easily voted the following day. We could have voted 2 or 3 days later. Because now I'm going to ask, if we're expected now to become proofreaders in addition to being legislators, then by all means, I think I'm going to ask for a little more time, after these bills are engrossed, so that I can sit down and actually review it. If that has to be now my responsibility. We have a $7+ million legislature, but somehow we're now expected to be the proofreaders of bills. This is a system that has worked for many, many years, and for some reason now there's a failure in that system. And now we're being denied the opportunity to request a public accountability by our other colleagues there. And that's really unfortunate. We should be demanding that transparency. And that's not what's happened here. When I say that this breeds a seed of mistrust, of course it does. It breeds a seed of mistrust when you're not willing to come forth and publicly account for it, and then make excuses as to why we're not willing to do it. And I just don't think that's right. I think the people expect more of us. It's not just among ourselves that we need to come to some sense of conclusion on this issue and accounting on this issue. We should publicly come to an accounting on this issue, because if we seemingly just turn away from it and turn a blind eye and it's not a big deal, that's my point. This leads the opportunity for corruption. Because can you imagine the budget bill? Can you imagine if someone went in there after the fact and changed figures? Do you think within a couple hours we're going to be able to go through an entire budget bill that we just passed and verify every single section, every single number that was done, if we don't have sanctity in the process of how legislation is passed? So that's the main concern that we have and what we've raised. And instead, all we're getting is resistance. And I think that's the main concern we have. Why is there not a desire to want to go on the floor of the legislature when we see that the actions of our body on the floor don't seem to matter, when the outcome is totally contrary to the actions and decisions that were made on the ruling with regards to this bill? And then at the same time, while we're accounting for, we're also saying, oh, by the way, I support this. We should separate the process of this bill and what happened versus the issue. And I'm heartbroken that it's on this issue, that it's on the issue for reparations and the intent to try to address and correct the timeline, the very limited timeline our people were given to file after waiting for so many years. That was the whole intent of the bill. And that's what I walked away from session when we had deliberated on this issue. And yet the outcome is totally different. And you have others now that are trying to politicize it even more by saying, oh, yes, this is what happened, but by the way, this is what I supported the same breath. I don't, you talk about trying to play politics on this issue. Who is not a descendant of anyone that was here during the war? that did not recognize the suffering and atrocities of our people. You know, who anywhere here does not have a sense that justice needs to be addressed on this issue? Nobody has an exclusive right to that. But we have certainly every right as members of the body to expect a public accounting of what happened in this case, especially if some have the interpretation, oh my goodness, this is law. I'd like to know who those people are that are not elected by the people of Guam that get to decide what is in the legislation that comes out of the Guam legislature.
Senator, but are you guys going to play ball today, or are you going to, in the words of Senator Rangel, continue to play with your balls at home?
Well, I think we're going to see whether or not the legislature and the other members there, including the speaker, are open to having this discussion. I'm taken aback that the speaker's response to this is to not want to have a public accounting on the floor of the legislature and make, assertions that somehow we're going to go after staff and we're trying to take people's jobs and where does that have a basis in being responsible in our government? We have an accounting to the people because this is what we have chosen to do. We have chosen to run for office and the people of Guam have put us in place. So we have a public accounting to do that. But for some reason, there's this continued defiance and resistance. They're saying, oh, we're walking away. We're here, Chris. I'm here at work today. You're not going to have a hard time finding us. You look in the records of the legislature over the last 10 months, you're going to see, including serious issues like judicial confirmations. Back in my previous life here in the legislature, when you had those type of hearings, you had a full house and then some. Go back and look at the record. So it's not an issue for us that we fear showing up to work. We have no problem. We're generally the ones sitting waiting. We're generally the ones attending and participating in public hearings, whether they're in the public hearing room or they're virtual. So we have no problem working, but we have every right to question the process and we have every right to have an expectation, as the public does, of public accounting of how this situation happened. And that's really the real issue here. How can we have confidence moving forward to continue to pass bills when something like this happened on this very important bill? How do we know it's not going to happen again? How did it happen in the first place? And simply having side conversations and press releases and making that the explanation to the public, I don't think that includes any degree of openness and transparency and honesty with how we're working with our people in the people's house.
So wait and see, I guess. 10 a.m. We'll see.
Well, we'll be here as we always are. We'll be here.
All right, Senator.
Wait, I did want to ask, because there was that long recess from when you guys went in at 10, and I think she recessed because of the error, right? So were the Republicans privy to hear from the legislature's legal counsel?
When we were made aware when the recess happened and that the first action was to shut off the cameras and all of a sudden they're starting to talk to us, that was when the concern were raised. I said, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Why aren't we having a public accounting? Why are we behind closed doors? We didn't stay in the room for that discussion. We thought that this has happened officially, then this should go back on the record and it should happen officially on the record. And that's a position that we took. We came back in the afternoon and waited like an hour and a half. We were sitting in the session hall for an hour and a half before session was called. Once again, the motion was made to have this discussion on the floor. And once again, we got voted down. So for us to just sit there and go along with the flow as if everything's, normal with the world and all is good when something like this has happened, I don't think it's right. And we're simply bringing it to the attention. Our very action is to bring to the attention of our colleagues who are very resistant. The remaining 7 in the session hall are, I can't say, I think there was one other that voted with us, a couple others that voted with us, but we didn't have enough votes to get this issue discussed on the floor. And that's really the real issue of transparency. And like I said, this breeds the opportunity for corruption when we want to do these issues behind closed doors and not have a public accounting of what is going on. And this is a serious issue. This is not casual. Oh, by the way, we just had a little, clerical mistake. Then if we had a little clerical mistake, why is there so much resistance to discussing this issue openly in the floor with the attention and eyes of the people upon us in terms of what action has happened? Because that loss of confidence, how do you get that back if this is how we react to this issue? We want to go behind closed doors. That to me is not the way to proceed. I don't think that builds a lot of confidence and favor, especially if we're doing this with the way this bill, some are claiming became law. It's an empty promise to our people. How are you going to fund this? And if you're going to fund this, what are you taking off the table now? Because it's not like the federal government is giving us extra money to pay this. We're taking money out of, if they're going to look at, of course, originally the law was set up in Congress that we're taking out of Section 30. But a large portion also of Section 30 is dedicated to funding a lot of current operations that are critical in our government. And I think we need to have that discussion. There should be a public discussion of our people also to be able to come in, because this is a very different, different issue, to come in and have their input on this. Because if you take out money from one end, there's going to be implications to the other end. At least let's know what those are, rather than, oh, this is law because it inadvertently got a clerical error in a bill. I don't want to be here making empty promises to people because I don't know how is this going to be funded. That's not right. Our people have gone through, there's so many unfunded mandates of legislation that have been passed year after year after year, and our people are left still, where is it? What is it? That's why there's almost that view of our people, our people get tired of that. I think we want to make sure that when we pass something on the floor that it's sound, and that if we're going to pass an appropriation, that the money's there for the intended purpose. Because I think people are tired of that. I don't think it's right for us to continue to do that.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, if you look at what Lieutenant Governor had said, it almost, call me crazy, but what if they just let this lie and say, oh, well, here's a convenient way. We turn this L into a W and let's get our uncle paid over the next, 10, 15 years, however long it's going to take.
And is that how we're supposed to pass legislation? Is that how the system was set up, the process was set up? I don't think so. I think you got people now that want to take this issue, this unfortunate issue, and play politics with it, or buy votes with it, especially on this issue. And like I said, any one of us that are descendants of those that suffered during the war, this is not an issue to play with. It's unfortunate it's taken this long, and now look what this unfortunate circumstance that has happened, and to want to further politicize this, especially when we don't have fully addressed how are we going to fund it, how much money is this going to cost, and how are we going to fully fund it, and let it go through the proper process. And let the people of Guam also have their input, because this is going to affect everyone here. That's how legislation should be addressed, not through this, oh, it's a clerical error and let's take advantage of it and let's politicize it and let's make empty promises and let's buy votes. That isn't what we should be doing. That really, truly is not what we should be doing, especially on any issue, more importantly, this issue.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, it's good to talk to you. I wish we were discussing a better circumstance than the one we're in right now.
It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Well,
Thank you.
Anyway,
luck.
you guys take care. At least the sun's out today. There's a positive.
All right.
All
Hey,
right.
on
See
that
you
note,
then.
while we're talking about sunshine, let's go ahead and seg to our next guest here. Pretty sure he loved that one.
Nice segue.